So it makes sense to me. What about you? Any thoughts on it?
Well, the snarky side of me is saying people are leaving research because they're tired of their research being ignored or dismissed. And so they want to go into the role that makes the call.
Okay.
And we're back. Told you, so much good stuff. I had to make this two parts. So let's watch the rest of the interview with Thomas and Lawton. That's true. Absolutely. So I want to go back to Thomas, what you were starting to talk about, since we're kind of thinking about AI in a good use case. And you are very well known, both of you, for tracking job titles, job progress, what the job market looks like in user experience. You've done a lot of quantitative data analysis and really understanding. And I would love for you to kind of talk a little bit about, one, why you did that, and two, what did you learn?
I'll start off with why. First, Lon and I are optimizers in a way. I think you and I like studying how we go about how we do things. So taking an inward look at how the industry works has always been a thing that we're interested in, whether that be people, process, or technology. On the people front, we talk about, hiring, interviews, titles, how we construct our teams. I think that's a really important part of how we work that sometimes gets a little bit ignored for process. And there's a number of different things that we've done to better understand teams, their makeup, and the general career path. One of those was going out and collecting a lot of different job descriptions because it's actually a really reliable stream of data. There's job postings pretty continually over time. And so if we could figure out a method to go out and collect that information, there's a lot of hints in those job descriptions about what those people do day to day and how that might vary from one company to another. It also tells us where jobs are located. It also tells us a rough estimate of the frequency of different positions and titles. It was just a really good, I guess, and free data source that we could use to better understand some of the people aspects of the meta of user experience.
Let me ask you a little follow-up to that, Thomas. Did you find, and maybe you didn't analyze to this depth, that what the job description said versus what the role actually turned out to be, there's a misalignment sometimes? I know you probably didn't get the opportunity to follow up, but just based on your own experience, did you find anything that you're like, yeah, that's not really what this role is about?
Yeah, this is something that's come up a few times, right? One where we'll look at the data from our job posting data set and we'll try to compare it to other measures to see how much they align. So here's an example. We looked at what methods are mentioned in the job postings. And we took that and we actually cross-referenced it with user interviews, has their state of user research report. And they had essentially a very similar chart that they created of which methods researchers in their survey said they used most frequently. So that was one of our data points of saying, is their conversion validity? And I think we, down to the shape of the graph and even like the top, I think 5-ish methods were the exact same. So there's a lot of things that do line up well. I think there's some discrepancies in self-reported salary versus salary ranges indicated in job postings. That's one area that can kind of differ a bit. I'm trying to think, one, if there were other real discrepancies that we've noticed, but generally, the promising thing is that when we looked for areas where we could see triangulation, concurrent findings, there's generally alignment in them with small variations here and there.
Yeah, and we did a smaller, more qualitative study that was more focused on the hiring process itself. The year before we did this kind of larger analysis of job descriptions. And I remember one of the biggest pain points that came out was job seekers feeling like the job descriptions were very boilerplate. generic almost. Like this job description for this company could have been at any company, right? It doesn't tell me about the product area that I'm studying or what the team dynamics are like or anything like that. So maybe to that extent, Jen, right? There's a mismatch between literally, okay, this accurately reflects I'm using these methods, but what does that look like at this company? It's maybe a little bit harder to say from the job description.
Yeah,
And
I can see that.
I was going to say, in summary, it's almost like the job description in aggregate are a better indicator of what our industry does than each individual description is a good representation of what that role is like at each company. It's ironic.
Yeah.
The job descriptions are better for us as data than for the applicant as a descriptor of why they're hiring and what it'll be like day to day.
Right. And if you think about like the potential flaws, a lot of times I've seen it asking for software that you're just not going to use, right? If it's most companies, researchers don't need to use Figma a lot. Maybe leave comments in it, but they're not really designing a lot. Depend on the company size and the role, right? But really knowing the ins and outs of Figma isn't generally a requirement for a user researcher.
I'm glad you said Figma because that was literally like, was it number one or number two, Thomas? It was one of the top. It was number one. Yeah, and it, like by a large margin, right? Like the number two was quite a bit less. And yeah,
And
we
I
got a
would,
lot of questions about that. Like, what researchers are using Figma? This is what jobs expect.
I mean, generally in the roles I've been in, I'm using Microsoft tools like PowerPoint
Yeah,
and Word.
Excel.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not using that. So I kind of wonder who's writing the job descriptions, right? Like, do they even know what they're looking for? I had a friend who said job descriptions are like a wish list to Santa. This is all the toys I want for Christmas, but I'm probably only going to get this little bit. So I'll ask for all the things and then I'll kind of determine, okay, what's really important and I'll hire based on that. I think that's probably still somewhat the case. I don't know, maybe it's different now that the job market is much more competitive, that they expect more of those criteria to be filled. What do you think?
Think that's true. I think that it actually is almost an explanation for why job descriptions might not be great or super specific. Because if you could expect that you're going to get 100 or 1,000 applicants, right, and you can take your pick based on that, you're less incentivized to put out something that's really highly tailored and uh, really thoughtful about what the position is going to be like.
That,
Yeah,
and we know
that's
they're not updated particularly often.
right. That as well.
They're
Yeah,
updated at all.
right. I also find it so fascinating as, somebody who might be looking for a job versus someone writing a job description. I find one of the top things that's in a job description is about the company. It's like, why are you putting this here? I can do that research on my own. It's a very generic, corporate written blah, blah, blah about what the company does. And I almost feel like a large percentage of the job description is about that. And it's just so not user centric if you think about it.
A lot of
Yeah,
them
we
start
believe in
with like
integrity.
we believe or about us.
Right. I mean, and then at the bottom, I want to know what the job role is. Are you digging today's video? Give me a like. Let me know. I would appreciate the feedback. Also curious, what percentage, if you remember or just ballpark, actually had a salary in the description?
I remember the percent loan. Do you? I mean, it was
Less
more than
than
I thought there would be.
50%.
Less than
Yeah,
50, but
I
more
want
than
to
I
say it was
thought.
around a third.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why do you
And that's
why?
another thing that we've looked at over the years, and I think it's grown a lot actually since the pandemic. There are a lot more roles that are remote or at least multi-site. Hey, we have offices in Seattle, San Francisco, Chicago. As long as you live in one of these areas, and a lot of states have been implementing laws where there is some required transparency. So if you are hiring like for instance, I'm in Colorado. If you're hiring in Colorado, you have to put a pay range. When I know that there's more and more states like that.
And it's introduced a new, for us, a kind of quirk in the data where, like you said, Lawton, there's so many multi-site jobs that could go many different places, and they'll put several different salary ranges. So we've got to figure out how we account for that in our various columns. So yeah, you see that a lot more frequently now than I really thought we would see it when we started collecting the data, but it's definitely still not the majority of jobs. Some folks express, I guess, dissatisfaction with how wide the ranges are for certain roles. Like some of them are, I mean, admittedly, I kind of agree with them. For some of them, they're extremely wide bounds, which is not super useful. Like I remember seeing one in our most recent round of data collection because we pull in new posts each week. The script that we run identifies if something's a week or more old, and we pull the new stuff. And I remember seeing one that's like 140 to 310. That was the salary range per year. And I thought, wow, that's like a career progression and then some.
I've seen some pretty wild ranges too. And it's like, really? Do you really think that people looking at that are going to go, I'm not going to go for the 310. I'm definitely going to try for the 120. Yeah, it's kind of crazy. So, what would you say are some of the skills? First, let's talk about hard skills when it comes to a researcher that you kind of saw, and maybe some soft skills.
Yeah, I'll start with the obvious one for researchers. We talk about methods a lot, right? It's kind of the tools that were created. The basic requirement for a researcher is that you are proficient with 3 specific methods: usability tests, interviews, survey. Those are the 3 you basically have to from the very beginning, an entry level. As you get more advanced in your career, move into higher level IC roles, what we saw is that the methodological variety increases a lot. So you're going to introduce other methods. Typically early on, you'll see card sorting and pre-testing come in. You'll see other things. Maybe you start to get really good with things like conjoint math to more advanced quantitative methods. But generally, it's expected that you're not only able to understand and apply and analyze data from very different types of studies, but you understand their trade-offs. So the defining marker of a very senior IC researcher is that their methodological toolbox, if we want to call it that, is very wide, and they understand when each tool should be applied to a given problem. So that was reflected in the job data pretty immediately. Well, do you want to talk about some other hard skills or soft skills?
The soft skills are the interesting dynamic that really start to play in with seniority. So I think what was the key word? It was like collaboration. That was there from day one. Researchers generally aren't just generating research that they can look at and be like, that's great research. You're creating these reports of findings for an audience that's going to use them. So from day one, you're expected to do that. But definitely the biggest differentiator between a senior or staff or very senior level researcher and someone who's very junior is the relationships, what you were talking about, Jim, with evangelization, even to an extent like implementing operations and helping the team to become more effective. These are skills that, as well as mentoring junior researchers, right? Helping to bring up the next generation of researchers. These are the things that differentiate someone who's a lot more advanced in their career from someone who's really just starting out. You're not expected to necessarily evangelize research as an intern, right?
Right. And so you were seeing those differences in the more senior roles.
I'd say that was the key differentiator between the more junior to mid-level roles and the senior and above.
That's interesting because I think to me that shows a little bit more thought and intention and understanding of what the different levels of researchers could bring into a company. Where I think somebody who may not know much about research just expects the first researcher or one of the first to do all the things.
Yeah.
Absolutely. There's a lot of
Yeah.
these are really interesting roles to analyze. A startup hiring a first researcher, often we'll call it like head of research, but it looks very different to other head of research positions. Sometimes within specific titles, there were these outliers that just looked very different to the others within them. And again, what you're talking about, we saw all the time. It'd be like this head of research position asking for very like relatively few years of experience and still saying like you're going to do all of the work around the research. You're not just going to focus on executing it. You're going to evangelize it across. You're going to work with execs and VPs. You're going to figure out mechanisms to hire and scale research. Like it's describing a lot, but it's expecting some very senior level developments from usually a very junior level candidate.
Would you say that that is because they want to pay them a junior salary?
Yeah, a little bit. I try not
Probably.
to judge it too much because I understand everyone's got their conditions they're working under, and I'm sure certain founders feel particularly stressed and they've got a specific amount of runway you're working with, and they want to find that rock star guru who's got no ego and just come there to lead the team. And for the right person, it could be, you know, a great first step into a very successful career. But yeah, I think there's really hoping for like the diamond in the rough thinking that goes on there.
Yeah. Did you have a tag for unicorn or rock star?
We should look for that.
Oh, that's so bad. So, what do you think the future of UX research looks like?
Thomas started to get into this, right? The name of the role, right now we're still calling it UX research. It's often called user research. And that's actually something we looked at was the title. Right now, UX is still probably the most popular one. But I feel like every couple of months you see some headline about, oh, was it Airbnb or Spotify? Somebody like dropped UX and now it's product, or maybe it's just research. It's hard to predict what terminology we're going to use. And we've used a lot of different terms over the years. It wasn't always UX. I know, Jen, you've been around in the field for a while. You might remember some other terms. Some of our advisors like terms like usability engineers and things like that. So that's likely to change. I think the tools will change the role to some extent, as they always have. I agree with what Thomas said earlier in terms of there's going to be technology, there is going to be a need to understand the people using them, there's going to be a need to improve it. AI is not going to solve that problem. So there's going to be something like it, even if it's not exactly what we're looking at. Maybe Thomas, you have a more concrete prediction than that.
No, I have, this might be almost a whole can of worms that I don't want to open up, but I have colliding pieces that I want to see how they work out. So, for example, one of the things that you're starting to see is research and insight roles. That's the title. It's like research and insight. And the problem with when we talk about roles like this, there's the spirit of what the role does, and then there's just the organizational chart, and then how you shove things into it. And so there are these collisions that happen. And one of the collisions that I'm tracking and interested to see where it ends up is with research and insights, there is market research, kind of user / product research, and then there's often like analytics teams, and they sit very differently in the org chart and how they potentially could be coming together. Like user and product research and analytics seem to be intersecting a lot right now. But then again, user research and MR are kind of coming together. I'm wondering if all three are going to kind of start to be just like an insight function together. That's one thing that I'm tracking. The other is what the distinction between a product insights person and a PM ends up being if the direction of the research career goes the way that some people think it will, which is like, yeah, it's still very data and evidence focused, and you do go out and collect in some way. Maybe it's very automated, but you go out and find this information, and then you take it and you think about it and you apply it to the product strategy and direction. And how does that different from a PM, right? So there's these collisions that I'm trying to figure out if they're going to run into each other. Kind of feel like a NASA scientist figuring out if the asteroid's going to hit and when, and how much is going to be chopped off. So those are the colliding stuff, trying to figure out how they come together or not.
That's
at least what I'm
absolutely.
tracking.
I've been there personally. A former company, we had market researchers and UX researchers were all under one umbrella. And woo, there was territory fighting going on there because market researchers were like, well, we're here to understand how people use the product. And we were like, whoa, no, that's what we do.
Yeah.
And so then we became design researchers. And I was like, well, that's pretty pigeonholed because now you're saying I'm just testing designs. And I wasn't testing designs. That wasn't all I was doing. And so there was a lot of conflict going on and who does what and where the lines were and the altitude and all that bullshit. And I was like, this is a mess. Probably is still a mess. And another example is the difference between UX and CX. I was at a conference leading a kind of a think tank about what the difference between UX and CX was. It was mostly a CX, customer experience conference. And they're like, our responsibility is to understand the user's journey through our product. And I'm like, oh, that sounds familiar. I tried to do that too. So there's so much confusion around these different titles. Even if you get one, it's still not clear what you actually do.
Yeah, absolutely. That classic case of how broad of scope do you define UX then influences if you think CX is something else. Example is a good one to study in terms of the broad definitions of the field where things overlap and how even just different ways of talking reveal the way folks think things relate to each other and the dividing lines that they draw.
Yeah, for sure. It leads partially to our detriment, I think, in the sense of us as an industry, when it's not really clear what we are. Everyone else outside of that, right? It's like, oh, I was a UX designer last week and now I'm a product designer. Like, really? Because you're doing the exact same thing. Why do you have a different role now? I don't understand. Thomas, you made me think of another question. I have heard a lot of people migrating from user experience research into product manager or product owner roles. Maybe you've seen this too. What are your thoughts on that kind of change?
I think for some folks it makes sense. I think certain individuals, they like taking the skills they have in terms of going in, doing a deep understanding of users and what that means for a product direction, and then cranking that notch up and making it a little bit more formal and going to become a product manager. And there's some folks who, like you said, take that transition. I think it's becoming a little bit more popular recently, isn't it? You see more folks making that change. More power to them. I think it makes sense. And if that's where they want to go, that's where they want to go. There's a lot of skills that will transfer, or at least there's a lot of ways of thinking that will transfer. And it's just a matter of then getting some of the more specific, very PM-y things that they look out for and bringing you on as a PM. So it makes sense to me. What about you? Any thoughts on it?
Well, the snarky side of me is saying people are leaving research because they're tired of their research being ignored or dismissed. And so they want to go into the role that makes the call.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
and I think there's an element as well of feeling that our field is beleaguered and besieged and maybe, I don't know, you see people thinking like, oh, we're going extinct. Right? So it's almost a retreat into something that they think is going to be a little bit more stable I've seen something similar. I don't know if you've seen this, Jen, but doing what we do at Drobit Labs, I get conversations from people. It's, oh yeah, I'm going to be a freelancer now. I don't think that companies are going to hire in-house anymore, so I want to be a consultant. I think that, again, like Thomas was saying, more power to them. I hope that they're able to make that transition work. But it is a slightly different skill set, and it's a very different way of working. And um, if you're not drawn to it or really ready to tackle the challenge of that transition, it might not be a pleasant one for you.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of unknowns that we see one side of the PM role, the one we interact with, right? We don't know all the other plates they have spinning in the background or what else kind of drama that they're dealing with. And to your point, honestly, a skill set. Like there is a designated role as a PM or PO for a reason. And to assume we can just step into that because we want to call the shots is a little bit of a stretch.
It is kind of funny though.
Yeah,
If you look in PM groups, one of the consistent discussions is like technical PMs versus like PMs from other non-technical, non-engineering backgrounds, business PMs, design PMs. Like there's these different camps. That, in a way, they've got like some similar issues to the user experience, and people come from very different areas and focus on different things. They define what they think it should be in different ways. So it's almost kind of nice when I look at those PM conversations. Like, yeah, everyone's got a little bit of this going on.
Yeah, and I don't think the PM roles are untouched by AI either. I'm hearing a
Oh,
little
no.
bit of panic going on over there as well. Well, I would like to just wrap up today. Thank you so much, both of you. This has been super great. I can't believe we've flown through this time so quickly. Woo! Went really
Yeah, no.
fast. Any other thoughts or topics that we didn't touch upon that you do a little share?
First off, while by time for Lawton to answer that, just want to say thanks again for having us on. I know it's been a while that we've been meaning to put this on, so I'm glad that we were able to make it happen. And yeah, looking forward to seeing it when it comes out, what people think about the various discussions. I've had a lot of fun. Hopefully
Yeah.
they have fun listening to it.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. Of course. That was nice of him to buy some time, Lawton.
man, I think we could have kept talking for another couple of hours. What's going to happen to the UX researcher role in 5 years versus what's happening to it right now? And I feel like we've addressed that with AI and the job market. I think that the titles and the way that we position our work has had an interesting effect in recent years. So yeah, I don't know. I think we covered the most interesting stuff that's going on these days.
That's fair. Any last thoughts from you, Thomas?
I think there's something valuable in calling out that there is malaise and like putting a label on that. Right. I think generally in the industry there's not just uncertainty. Uncertainty is something that like is something about the data that you're presented with. There's uncertainty in terms of how you not get. That's uncertainty. It's beyond uncertainty. There's malaise around that uncertainty. I think it's really what's going on. I mean, you're not, crazy for feeling that. And generally, we all kind of soak up each other's energy in that way. So we're all in this a little bit together, but I don't know. I don't want to get too in like broy stoicism, but in a way, I think things are generally going to be okay in spirit, like we were talking about earlier. There is something to designing technology for the people who use it, and there's inherent value in that. And good UX is good business. So we have to deal with this kind of uncomfortable period for some time, but I do see different potential and hopeful future states of the industry and of the field. It might be comfortable for a while, and we might be in this malaise for a bit, but there is another side. It's not like it's dead. I just want to kind of go on record saying that.
I appreciate that optimism because sometimes it just feels so dark and gloomy, but everything ebbs and flows. So I think that's the perfect way to wrap up our chat today. So thank you so much, both of you, Thomas and Lawton. I had a great time and really appreciate your perspectives.
Thanks, Jen.
Honored to be
Happy
here with you,
talk to
Jen. Thank you.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much.